From Carolla One Studios and Gina's house and Brian's house, this is the Adam Carolla Show. Adam's guest today, the director of The King of Staten Island, Judd Apatow. With Gina Grad on news, Bald Brian on sound effects, and Vinny Tortorich stops by, and now the only mandate he would comply with is to get it on. Adam Carolla.
Yeah, get it on. Got to get it on. No choice but to get on. A mandate, you get it on. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for sharing, right, Gina Grad?
That's right.
Handball, Brian.
You realize I'm not a comedian.
Vinny Tortorich is joining us. Oh, so many topics to get into with Vinny.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Guy.
Hey.
I'll tell you, man, first things first. If you want to eat and you want to eat healthy, the world conspires against you, as Vinny knows. It conspires against you. And I'll give you an example. It reminded me as I was leaving the house, I grabbed my green juice, and the green juice is cucumber, celery, spinach, lemon, kale, parsley, and it tastes like ass, right? And you know who the true smoothie king is? Mike August. He loves his smoothies, you know. And we were in Houston, and Mike said, "It's $5 Friday at the Smoothie King. Let's get a smoothie." And I said, "Mike, we're in Houston. The place has the word king and smoothie in it, and I don't think there's going to be anything on that menu that I can ingest." And he said, "There's literally 65 smoothie combinations on there. They got to have one green one." And I said, "Yeah, just one green, just a green one, right?" And he said, "Yeah, there's something up there." So Max Pata jumped in the car, the rental car, and Mike announced we're making the pilgrimage to the Smoothie King. And he was pumped. He ordered the angel food, which...
Oh.
strawberries, banana, soy protein, non-fat milk, vanilla, and honey, and Vinny's just yacked into his cowboy boot. Okay. But then the process. So now we're at the drive-thru and we're looking down the menu, and the woman is like, "Can I help you?" And I'm like, "Okay, we're on the clock." And I'm looking for green, I'm looking for healthy. And everything starts with banana, apple, blueberry, pineapple, and it's the green smoothie is pineapple, banana, and kale, or parsley or whatever it is. And I keep saying that's not going to work. So we say to the woman through the speaker, is there just a green smoothie, just something that's kale or cucumber or some lemon, just a green smoothie? And she says, "Well, there's apple and, cucumber and lemon."
A green apple.
Right. And we go, "Okay, can you leave out the apple? Just leave out the apple." And she's like, "Oh, so you want the apple smoothie, lemon, whatever?" And it's like, first off, people who take your order don't fucking speak English anymore. I'm not even talking about English as a language. I just mean they don't speak human anymore. Like, you can't say to them, "Yes, I'll take the Garden of Eden. No apples. Like, they can't process it." So we're all just sitting there, and I say to Mike, "There's no way we're getting what we want." But Chris and I both attempt to get the smoothie minus the fruit. We
asked them just all vegetables. Can you just give us
just all vegetables?
Yeah.
And then at some point we screwed up and said something like "no sugar" or something like that, and they went, "Yeah, no sugar." And we pulled up to the window, and they handed everyone the smoothies, and I took one hit, and it tasted like it was all apple, and I just set it down in the drink holder, and I went, "Well, I knew this was going to happen, but I knew it was going to happen when I said to you, Mike, there's nothing at the Smoothie King." I'm holding up the menu, the possibilities. There's 65 offerings here. It's just none of them would be Vinny approved.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Smoothie King menu like we are looking at it online, and they have them broken out into like different categories. And other categories are like, if you're trying to avoid sugar, or if you want a vegetable blend, or if you want a whatever, like that. It's not conducive to that kind of eating regimen.
Well, and they say they have a low carb smoothie, but I'm not really seeing where that applies.
So
yeah, the muscle ranch is got eggs in it, but that's about it. There's a lot of strawberries, bananas, wheat germ, which makes no sense.
Oh,
Here's the thing. I want to bring this up right away. In 1985, I walked into a Smoothie King in New Orleans, and they said to me, hey, we don't put sugar in here. And I said, I see sugar there. And they said, no, that's turbinado, which I still see they have on their list. And I said, no, you don't understand. Turbinado is sugar. And they said, no, sir, you don't understand. Turbinado is pure energy. And I went, it's sugar. There's no, that's one of my 65 words that means sugar whenever you see it somewhere in a label. They're actually putting granulated sugar on top of all of the other sugar, and you would be better at a Krispy Kreme.
Vinny, you'll appreciate this. I'm digging deep into their menu online. They have 3 they brand as Keto Champ. 1 Keto Champ berry, Keto Champ chocolate, Keto Champ coffee. They have 19, 18, and 14 carbs respectively.
Look, it's crazy because, the word keto is not regulated by any group or organization. The FDA doesn't regulate the word keto, just like they don't regulate the word vegan. Or you can have a hamburger, a real meat hamburger, and call it a vegan burger. No one can stop you from doing that. No one can stop you from putting keto on anything. There's no government regulation. Someone sent me a product the other day and said, this is certified keto. And I looked at it and went, well, what the fuck does that mean? No one's certified keto.
Is there a certification body?
No, exactly.
Like kosher?
Yeah,
Kosher and keto?
I now, unfortunately, the smoothie bug had bitten this podcaster, and I said, I now want my smoothie. I want the fucking one I want. And it's sad to me that not only do they not offer the one I want, but I can't get them to make me the one I want, even though they have the ingredients back there. So Mike and Chris went off to the club to tech the club. And I walked to the Jamba Juice. And I walked into the Jamba Juice and I said, I want a green smoothie. And everything started with apple or banana or berry or whatever. And I just said, look, here's what we're going to do. I just want the kale and the spinach and the lemon and just pulverize it. I'm just going to sit here and watch you. Now, it tasted horrible. I had to literally walk them through it and stand there while they did it. But eventually, I got my pulverized vegetables. Now, that's how difficult it is. And these are smoothie places. Like, hey, this is for the health-conscious person. This is for the person who's on the diet. They're not going to eat the burger and fries. They're trying to lose some weight. They're going to the healthy alternative, which they think is a smoothie. And it's right up there with breakfast bars. There's really no such thing as a healthy smoothie, and there's no such thing as a healthy breakfast bar, save the one that's just made of 100% bison meat, or the smoothie, which is just pulverized lawn trimmings with some lemon zest in there. Is that an accurate statement, Vinny?
That is. As a matter of fact, I would put the breakfast bar as higher on the list of good things to eat over a smoothie. About 5 or 6 years ago, I did a man on the street where I went out to a Jamba Juice in LA, and I was asking people what they were drinking on the way out. And in the video, I would put the sugar content. Some of these things had 65 and 70 grams of sugar in a 12 to 15 ounce or 16 ounce cup of juice. That's like just pouring straight sugar in there. And every person walking out said, I thought I was doing the right thing. At least I'm getting, they tell you you're getting vitamins. Well, yeah, you're getting some phytonutrients if you eat vegetables and fruit, but you're drinking a thing full of straight sugar. As a matter of fact, the people at Jamba Juice called the cops on me before it was all over with.
Well, to be fair, you were just wearing a conch shell out there and a choker. Maybe that's what they objected to. Maybe it wasn't the actual questioning. Look, the drink the stuff that I'm holding up, which is it's just called pressed. It's a juicery. It's pressed juicery. Lynette goes out and buys a sort of smorgasbord of this stuff and has it sent to the house. It's all fresh pressed juice. They're all different combinations. The one she drinks has 250 calories in 12 ounces, and the one I drink has 50 because there's just no such thing as drinking the ones with the pineapple, the orange juice, the beets, the apple juice. I look at the back label. It's 250 calories. The same amount of Coca-Cola is $1.40, right?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, and it's just Coca-Cola is all sugar and chemicals. At least you're getting something good. You're actually having something that's good for yourself in that. The one Lynette's having is equivalent to what Dawson, that whole thing Dawson was doing a few years ago, where it's your liver is a meritocracy. It doesn't care what you're doing. Your liver's going to do what it's going to do. Lynette's putting sugar in and she'll get thinner. If you have the same smoothie, you're going to gain weight.
Right.
It doesn't mean that metabolically Lynette is healthier because she can still get fatty liver disease. She can still get her A1Cs can go up to where she has type 2 diabetes and never gain a pound. But so far she's stayed away from that, which is good.
Well, it's look, it's better that than drinking 2 Cokes, but don't kid yourself. When you look at the back of the label and it's 250 calories, it's coming from sugar. And look, it is the simplest lesson in all of life, which is her pressed juice tastes good. Mine tastes bad. August's smoothie tastes good. Mine tasted bad. The breakfast bar that tastes good is bad. It's sort of like, remember those workout machines where you'd put the belt around your waist and the thing would just vibrate while you stood there and you looked at it and you went, well, that doesn't seem so bad. That's not like doing chin-ups with a weighted vest on or running in sand or doing push-ups.
I can handle this.
I could watch TV, drink a King smoothie or the Smoothie King offering and shed the pounds. And so all of life, and I'm not just talking about as it pertains to diet. I'm just talking about life. You want to drink the smoothie. It tastes good. It's no good. You want to work out, except for you're not moving. It's just a belt that goes around your ass and shakes it vigorously. Seems easy. Not effective. Does nothing. There's a sad state that we can never work around that's essentially gravity, which is that smoothie can't taste good. That workout can't be easy. There's a version of this that works that's at play at work. It's at play at school. It's at play during sports. Like, it's just there. We built an entire world around trying to get around it, like trying to game it a little bit, seeing if we could slide around it. And we should all just lean into it. We should all just go, fuck it. This smoothie tastes like shit. It's good for me.
That's the one for me.
And there's something there's something at a different level here. Like, I enjoyed the shit out of that smoothie, even though it was just pulverized kale and a bunch of lemon, and it didn't taste good at all. But there was something different about it. I had done it. I had created it. It was good for me. So anyway, when I was thinking about Vinny on the ride in, I was thinking about these Smoothie Kings and just how goddamn difficult it is to go out there and do what's right.
Well, to Vinny's point about the name, there's no regulations with the naming of things, the naming conventions. If you were at Smoothie King, I'm obsessed with this menu. Adam, you might have been intrigued by the literally green. I'm looking at it's green veggie lemon ginger spinach. That sounds like something you would
right.
Some low carb, low sugar. The veggie lemon ginger spinach, 80 grams of carbs. 80.
Right.
80.
Right. Well, there you go.
I think that's what we ordered. No, I remember I had greens, lemon, and ginger in the at the Smoothie King, but then it had a bunch of apples and pineapple in it.
Right.
They left that part out.
Yeah.
Mango, pineapple, papaya.
Right.
White grape.
Couldn't
The
get
holy trinity of no-nos.
Yeah.
Tropical. horrible.
So there's really, sadly, there's nothing out there that tastes worth a damn, but there is a part of it where at a certain point you can enjoy it on a different level. It's not the kind of enjoyment that you're used to. It's a satisfactory kind of enjoyment, not an actual pleasure enjoyment. Vinny, what's your next big physical challenge? Are you training for anything?
Right now, I'm training for life because of this COVID thing. I'm actually, and most people won't know what this is, but I've brought more equipment into my house. I now have a set of rollers for my bike. So I'm riding the bike here in the house, watching, the Lance Armstrong thing, as a matter of fact.
I literally just wrote down Lance Armstrong because I want to
we
talk
can
about
that
that.
in a minute too, because I have thoughts. I've watched the first episode, but I'm on the bike, I'm training, I'm going out, I'm hiking a lot. But we don't know when we could get on a plane again and go do anything. I've been kayaking a lot. So much that I've hurt my shoulder again, but I'm still planning on doing that bayou trip. I always just throw something in front of me. And I think everyone should do that. There's a lot of talk during this whole COVID thing of how everyone's going to magically get in shape, because the one thing they found is if you're morbidly obese, this could kill you. And everyone's talking about, finally getting into shape. I don't see that happening. And if it was, people say, well, how can you be so negative? It's like, no, I'm not negative. I'm pretty positive that it won't happen. Because if it would happen, it would happen while we have all this downtime. I don't want, usually people go, well, you don't understand. I work 16 hours a day. I work 12 hours a day. Well, hell, now you're not working at all. And everyone has a pair of feet and everyone has a sidewalk. You could just get out and start walking, and people aren't doing it. All I see it online every day. I'm getting fatter and fatter and fatter, and I've put on 20 pounds and 30 pounds. Well, if you were serious about getting into this, wouldn't right now be that time?
Well, our problem as humans is we don't want to start doing some things and quit doing others. That's where New Year's Eve kicks in, I always tell you, every guy who smoked, I'd just go, well, why don't you quit now? New Year's is coming up. I'll quit then. So that's what we do. We do it with starting things and stopping things. And I can't start now. I'm too emotionally depressed, or I'm too what have you. The Lance Armstrong thing is interesting. And I really want everyone's sort of breakdown of this situation. I was trying to break it down with Jimmy and Cousin Sal yesterday. They have no sympathy for Lance Armstrong, and he's not a sympathetic character. But what I'm trying to say to everyone, it's kind of, to me, here's what it is. It's kind of like when somebody gets busted for, let's say, insider trading, Martha Stewart, right?
Stewart.
If my guy called me right now, if my tax guy, my investment guy called me right now and said, hey, you didn't hear it from me, but there's this stock is going to fold because the FDA has lifted the regulation or whatever. Do you want me to sell it? Who amongst us would go, sorry, that's wrong. I'm going to take the loss. I'm surprised that you even called me. Who amongst us wouldn't go, yeah, go ahead and do it. Dump
Thank
it.
you.
Okay, thank you. And then, so now you've done this thing that's wrong. And then later on, the feds come to you and they start questioning you. Hey, did you know about this stock dump before you blah, blah, blah? And you go, no, I didn't know. And they go, yeah, we're going to come back and question you more tomorrow. And now you really get your story straight. You know what I mean? Then later on, it turns out not only did you do this illegal stock dump, but you lied. And it's like, yeah, I know, because that's the way this was going to happen, And so Lance Armstrong, who I don't know, I don't even know if I've ever met him, but I don't have, cycling is not my sport, and I don't have a dog in the fight. But these other guys had gotten hold of a drug, and it was a game changer. It was changing the game.
Here's how it worked. Cycling, they've been cheating in the Tour de France since the first year of it, where people actually got off of their bike and got in carts and buggies and got advanced up the course. And that's the truth. So, but you can't look at that. What you have to look at is when it all started. Cyclists have been cheating from the beginning of time, but it was all legal. It would be like, right now the NFL says we have a zero, tolerance for drugs. Okay, but they're all taking steroids. Just look at them. Look at Lambert. Lambert was 6'4" and barely went 215. Now look at a middle linebacker today. They don't look like the same human being, right? How did that happen? How did physical specimens come around? Well, they're all taking steroids. That's how they do it, right? A big lineman back in Merlin Olsen days weighed 250. Now they weigh 350 and they're moving like a damn running back. How did that happen? It's drugs. Even though the league says there's a zero tolerance to drugs, they turned a blind eye to it because everyone's making big bucks. Cycling was the same way. Everybody was cheating, but no one said anything. And then there was something right before Lance, and I hope they go into it in this show. It was called the Festina affair. The Festina watch company had a team, and that's back when they were actually blood doping with their own blood. Before EPO came out, before Amgen created that erythroprotein or whatever it's called, they would literally take the cyclist's own blood out while they were training. They would put it in a centrifuge machine, separate the white blood cells from the red blood cells, and then right before the race, put their own blood cells back in their body.
That sounds like a big loophole. I mean, technically, it's not drugs.
Well, it's not drugs, but it would raise their hematocrit level way high. And of course, when you have more red blood cells, more oxygen to the system, and when the Krebs cycle works through, you are a stronger athlete. Mm-hmm. So the way they caught Festina was they found ice chests full of blood on the bus. And that's how they busted them. And then the team looked around and went, wait, why are you guys busting us? What's going on here? And cyclists still, after that, they looked at it and went, okay, that was just a one-off. Someone wanted to get to Festina. But then they started doing this with more and more people. But it would be like going to the NFL and say, hey, we're going to start randomly checking you guys. They would all go, what? What are you doing? We're all doing it.
Well, so hold on. They all did it. And then there was a next level kind of breakthrough. And if you didn't do it, you weren't competitive. I mean, that's it. You weren't competitive with those people. So you can say, well, so be it. Then don't be competitive or don't, or I don't know what the answer is. You're no longer, you're being pushed out of your own profession. So then, then they go, well, then go bust those guys that are doing it. But it's like, you're not the sanctioning body. I don't know how you enforce this thing that someone else is doing. So you have basically two choices. You can either quit or you can participate in what they're doing. And then, by the way, is it cheating if they're doing it as well? Later on.
Right. There's no advantage because everyone's doing the same thing.
Right. So I think later on, all the lying and threatening of lawsuits and throwing other people under the bus, that's what caused a lot of the disdain for Lance Armstrong. But as far as the activity goes, is it cheating if everyone's cheating? I guess is my question.
I don't think it's cheating if everyone's doing the same thing, and they all were. As a matter of fact, when they took Lance's yellow jerseys away, they couldn't even get it to the second place or third place guy because they've
been busted too.
They'd all been busted. It was just such a pig fuck. They didn't know where to go to get to they could have given it to the last place guy, and guess what? He probably had EPO in him also. So it's not cheating if everyone's doing it.
Adam, let me ask you this question then. One guy that you say you hate, and I hate too, I agree with you 100%, is the guy who says to his kid, hey, you screw that guy before he screws you. So this feels very similar to that in the sense like, hey, everyone else is doing it. I better get on top of this because otherwise I'm going to fall behind.
Well, hold on. I don't like that dad, and I don't like how you raise kids. But in this scenario, that guy's already screwing you. So this notion of, you screw him before he screws you, I don't agree with. If he's physically raping you, then you're allowed to screw him back. So Lance Armstrong notices he goes from the number one rider in the world to the middle of the pack. And how did that happen? So now he's being screwed, so now he's screwing back. That's the way I look at it. Anyway, I'm just saying it's an oversimplification to say he should have never done it. Well, if he never did it, we wouldn't know his name. I mean, quite honestly.
You're right.
It's all naive.
It's a strange thing. I think the reason that the UCI started going after this, as the governing body for cycling, is for one reason and one reason only. When EPO first came out, these athletes were dying from it. And the reason they were dying left and right in training and everything else, they were trying it out. If you take too much and you become dehydrated, your blood will thicken and it will stop your heart. Oh. So the young athletes were dying. And the head of the UCI says, we need to go check this out. We need to see what's going on. And then they said, look, if we could just ban this one thing because it's killing people. Well, there's Dr. Ferrari, no association with the car company. He figured out you don't have to take that much for it to work because you only need about a 1% advantage to win a race, right?
Well, I think somebody in the doc said, you take the Tour de France, it's 2,400 miles. You have a guy with just a couple percentage points difference over the course of 2,300 miles. The one guy finishes 200 miles an hour, 200 miles ahead of the guy with just a percentage, just a couple of. It's like automotive racing. The F1 guys, the guy who's sitting on the pole or the guy who's sitting in ninth place, 0.3 of a second a lap. The track's 3 miles around, or 0.5, half a second or whatever. It's minuscule at that level. When you get to that level of F1 or that level of cycling, 2 percentage points, and you're clearly ahead of the guy in second place. Sorry, Vinny. Go ahead.
That's very true. I didn't get to that part. I only watched the first hour because I spent an hour on my rollers. But the one thing, power to weight ratio matters on a bicycle. You have X amount of power. And for every pound you can lose, every pound of body weight you can lose, that, your power to weight ratio goes way up. So that matters. Most of these guys are emaciated. I mean, you see cyclists, they're complete. Back when I was doing it competitively in mountain biking, hell, you've seen me. But I would be down to 155 pounds, and I played football at 225. That's a big discrepancy.
Yeah. I'll tell you one thing I did learn about the world of cycling is all Lance's like former cycle mate teammates and guys who's contemporaries and stuff, they all look fit and young and hot. Like they're the hottest dads you've ever seen. They're a bunch of 45-year-old guys that just look like models now. There's something about that cycling life that just dials
makes you sinewy.
All right, let me hit Geico here. Time for another great segment from our friends at Geico. Geico wants to thank their customers for giving back, and they're giving you a 15% credit on your car and motorcycle policies for current and new customers. Geico's committed for the long haul, so you get the 15%. It lasts the full length of the policy, the full term of the policy. Visit geico.com/giveback for info and eligibility. Let's get our answers. I'll give you some answers to your questions. You got a question, Kaylin? You got an automotive question you want me to answer?
I do, yeah. The other day I went to go get you some gas for your car, and I asked you, okay, so you get the good stuff, right? The expensive stuff? And you said no, just the cheap stuff.
Yep.
And now I read the manual for my car when I first got it, which is a 2018 Honda Civic Sport, and it says to use the expensive stuff. And your car is a lot nicer than mine. So do I really need to be using the expensive stuff if you're not?
So here's the thing about gas. When all engines kind of work the same sort of before computers, then the higher octane stuff was just better. But now you don't need to exceed whatever the manufacturer wants. So if they say 87 is fine, then 87 is fine. Your car ends with the name Sport. So that's what you call a car that has high performance, or a kid who's ironically bad at sports, and you're explaining you'll get them next time, Sport. So if you have a car like one of my racing car, 4 cylinders, that thing takes 116 octane. If you have something like what I'm driving now, the Infinity, all you need to do is get to what the manufacturer wants, which will usually be printed, I think, on the inside of the gas flap door. If they need 91 or 92, you have to go there. If you don't, you're just throwing money away. And even if it needs the high stuff and you give it the low stuff, the computer will adjust the timing and many other facets of the engine so that it doesn't ping and knock and damage the engine like it used to. It used to damage your engine with the low-grade stuff. So put the good stuff in your body in the form of a smoothie that tastes like ass. And as far as your car goes, you don't need to exceed what the manufacturer wants. And it's not going to hurt to put 92 octane in your car that requires 87 or 89 octane. You're just going to pay an extra 40 cents a gallon for no good reason at all. But thank you, Kaylin.
Thank you.
And look at you reading a manual. All right. I want to thank Geico for that. Just thought these days you could use a little information. So go to geico.com and save that 15%. They're giving you a credit. They're kicking it back to you at geico.com/giveback. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back with Vinny and the news right after this.
Give me the news with Grad. News with Gina Grad. Breaking viral, all those crazy Trump tweets. Give me news with Gina Grad. Trouble in the Middle East. Celebrity drunk meltdowns. Need news with Gina Grad.
The news with Gina Grad.
Well, I was going to tell you that President Trump is issuing an executive order relating to social media after he got in a little Twitter battle on Tuesday. But now I'm telling you that he has signed an executive order. This just came across my notifications 45 seconds ago. So he's threatening penalties against social media companies over allegations of bias against conservatives. This is from Business Insider. I'm just reading it right here off the screen here. So this comes after 2 days after Twitter added fact-checking links, which they've never done before, to 2 of Trump's tweets, pushing false claims about voting by mail. Essentially, with the pandemic, everyone is supposed to get a vote by mail ballot, and Trump says it's going to lead to all kinds of cheating and voter fraud, and we can't let it happen. And then they put a little link next to it, get the facts about this. So according to a leaked draft of the order, Trump is primarily seeking to empower federal regulations to amend, it's called Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which gives social media companies broad authority to moderate speech on their platforms. So Section 230 stipulates that tech companies are not responsible for comments and other content that users post on their platform. But Trump's orders call for tech companies to lose this section of protection if they do anything to discriminate against users, him, I guess in this case, or restrict their access to a platform without giving them a fair hearing or take other actions.
Is anybody coming up with alternative platforms to Twitter, Google? I mean, not Google's platform, search engines, but I mean, the reality is there's going to need to be some competition in that market space, and I don't know how it works. But is somebody thinking about this?
They exist, but you don't know their names, and
Yeah,
you know,
they
and
haven't
frankly,
caught on.
Yeah, they're not mainstream, and there's probably someone coming for them. I mean, what was bigger than Friendster? What was bigger than MySpace? So I'm sure there'll be another generation, but we don't know their names yet.
Because I don't know. I'm not sure if you can ever really regulate anything fully and correctly. I just think there needs the things that kind of keep airlines in check is a bunch of airlines, or
Right.
the thing that kind of keeps the reason there's so much.
But airlines keep getting worse.
Well, they keep getting worse, but they're
not falling out of the sky at an alarming rate.
They're getting cheaper. I mean, basically what they're doing is they're going. What they've figured out is the price is the bottom line. So people put up with no snacks and no drinks and tighter seats and whatever. If you can get from here to Austin for $89. That's the direction. They started going the other direction. They were going Concorde, faster, Champagne, Pub, and the 747. They've all thrown in the towel with that, and everything is just turned into who can safely, but the least comfortably, get people across the country, and that's what they're doing. But at some point, I just think there's going to have to be alternatives, and I don't know when that's coming. I really wish, it's going to be something, right?
But what problem would that eventually solve? I mean, what's the difference? Because it'll just be another one.
I think right now the conservatives think that Twitter and Facebook or Twitter and Google and whoever are YouTube or whatever are unjustly kind of putting their thumb on the scale and leaning it toward the left. And there's some evidence that that's going on to some degree. And I think the only thing, I don't think you can argue it away or legislate it away because there's so much nuance to it. Like, who knows? But it's going on, and there's just going to have to be a competitor. I don't think you can, and it'll take place, but the other one will lean the other direction. And I think it's probably what's going to happen, and then people go their own direction. Yes, sorry.
That makes sense, but I'm just wondering, in terms of this particular case, Trump takes full advantage of free speech by accusing people of things, calling people names, going after Joe Scarborough's, dead assistant, and saying all these things that may or may not be true. And then he says something that may or may not be true about voting, vote by mail. And they said, well, hold on, click this link. We're not taking down the tweet. We're just saying, click this link if you want us to fact check that. So he's taking full advantage of the free speech element.
I agree. I mean, look, he says insane. He shouldn't, some of his tweets are insane. There's no doubt about it. Where we're getting into a danger zone, to me, is like you take this COVID thing, and a couple of months ago, if there was some doctors that were talking about opening it up and not doing the lockdown or hydroxychloroquine, somebody who was deciding that's irresponsible speech, we're going to take you down. That's when it gets into kind of a dangerous zone to me, because to me, it's an alternative point of view that we should hear and then kind of decide on our own what we believe or what is true. At a certain point, you got to take care of your own kids. You have to make your own decisions. I want to hear the group of doctors that say close it down. I want to hear the group of doctors that say open it up.
Right.
All right.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, there's so much going on with this, with the George Floyd case and with the riots that, as we record this, were really going off last night, both here in Los Angeles, in Minneapolis, in, I believe, Tennessee. Protesters just filled the streets, especially in Minneapolis, for a second night to demand justice for George Floyd. He died in police custody after allegedly.
What was that cop doing? What? I get the. There's a lot of this stuff that has kind of a context to it. Like there's a struggle. Right. They take the guy down. Once they take the guy down, the adrenaline is still flowing, and the cops are, like we showed you that old footage of the guy out here got pulled off a horse, and all these cops came running up to him and were kicking him because they're in a feeding frenzy at that point. Right. They have the adrenaline, or the gun's out. They're yelling, and the gun's out. And they're yelling, and this is highly charged situation. When a guy's handcuffed and your knee is on his neck and you're starting to get into minute 5, what's going on? I mean, I know your training is horrible. I know you're horrible, but I mean, like, first off, what are the other 3 cops doing? What are the other 3 doing? I don't know all the official particulars, but the adrenaline should have been brought down, the heat of the moment. If the guy was struggling, he was struggling. He's now completely subdued. we're going to sit in perpetuity with my knee on his neck? Like, what are we waiting for? Are we waiting for a van to show up? Like, were they waiting on something?
Don't they handcuff him at some point?
He was handcuffed
during that.
I don't have the stomach to watch the video personally, but if he was subdued or not able to attack, then what's the point of having a knee on his neck?
And there was it doesn't seem that there's any evidence of struggle in terms of him not cooperating. In fact, the clip I did pull is the store owner who initially did call the police because George Floyd allegedly tried to pay for food with a fake $20 bill. So the store owner is talking to Don Lemon on CNN. This guy didn't want that. He just called the police because somebody, basically forged, gave him fake money. But I want to make sure that this is the clip of that and not the actual knee on the neck.
I've seen there's some, I don't know how it works, but there's a chunk that's kind of missing. There's the part where they... Yeah. I don't know where that footage is. There's the part where they handcuffed him and sort of subdue him, and then it goes to neck. Yes,
and the department released it, and I use air quotes because I didn't know you could redact video. So you can, and what that means is there are two giant blocked out rectangles over people as they move in the video. So this heavily redacted video doesn't help at all. But it's interesting to see the perspective of the man who initially called the police.
Did you see resistance?
No.
On the videotape that you have, your surveillance video, you see no resistance from George Floyd.
Our camera angle shows exactly what was recorded as the outside bystander. What I seen was exactly what you seen.
Yeah, it's horrible. But the good news, I guess, is these guys are going to be prosecuted. I mean, big time.
Well, they have to. I mean, when you get notifications saying the police officers have been fired for murder. Okay, that's a new one. So, and even the mayor of Jacob Fry is asking, why are there no charges being filed? So it's being investigated. People are obviously angry. Downtown LA, that's what we spent most of our night on Conway last night because there was hundreds of protesters. They made their way onto the freeway downtown on the 101 and blocked traffic down to, God knows where, probably Orange County. Because they were, and I don't know if you saw the footage, they all started chasing this police cruiser. This isn't it, but this is just some of the looting in Minnesota.
I saw it.
And threw a skateboard through the windshield.
Yeah. I always have these horrible semi-racist and sort of macabre thoughts as I watch. But when I was watching all the protests going on in Minnesota, first thing I thought was, do they got enough black people over there to fully pull this off? And then I realized 3/4 of the people protesting were white in Minnesota, which I guess we call that progress, right? Because if you took a look at Ferguson, Missouri, and we had all the news cameras out there and everyone was out on the street, it was, if it wasn't 100% black, it was 96% black, and the whole Ferguson thing. Minnesota, that could have been a 50-50 draw there.
Chris can verify this, but I think Minnesota has a huge Somali population. Mm-hmm. I think that's where they did their casting call for the Pirates in Captain Phillips.
That is
I am the captain now. I think that's what actually did the casting call because there were so many native Africans.
Yeah, when I went to meet up with you guys in Indianapolis, or where I had a layover in Minneapolis airport, it was all Somalian workers there. Everybody.
Oh,
there you go.
It's not to say that the protesters are Somali, but there is that.
They better be.
Well, I think I would assume they have all kinds of statistics about Africa, black Americans from Africa and American blacks being quite different. So I would imagine there's probably less Somali blacks that are out protesting. But I'll tell you, white chicks had picked up the slack in Minnesota because when I was looking at all the cops and the tear gas canisters and all the stuff they normally do, a lot of white skater dudes and white chicks in the mix as well.
Yeah.
All right, sorry.
Well, there may be more rioting. It may be over. We don't know yet in terms of, what's going to take place tonight. But obviously people are very...
Stay off the fucking freeway, would you? For the love of fucking Christ. I get it. You're pissed, but there's a couple things. Don't block the fucking freeway. You're not going to win over the hearts and minds of America if you stop us from getting to work or getting home from work or whatever that is. Number one, leave the fucking freeway alone. Number two, jumping on cop car hoods and busting windows and stuff, you're liable to get more death that way. And just go ahead and protest. But the problem is burning down Targets and AutoZones. You're not winning over any fans. You want people. Here's the thing. America agrees with you. We agree that cop was evil and a murderer, and we need to weed those guys out of the system. And so we do fundamentally agree with that as Americans. But if you burn down an AutoZone, now we're torn because now we disagree with what the cop did and we disagree with how you're expressing yourself. Thank you. All right. Can you find any footage, Max Apatow, of the Minnesota riots going on in there? And again, you're going to see a lot of pale faces over there. Oh, okay. All right.
But a lot of it was the fire, so we'll see if we can get one.
This is kind of daytime. The footage I saw was daytime. Cops were up on the roof of a building. They were using
I think I know what you're talking about.
Their bikes as barricades.
Right.
The protesters, there's just a lot of white dudes out there just getting it on.
Yeah, they were standing, it looked like the cops were guarding a bank. It looked like they were all standing in front of a bank, and that's where everyone was screaming at them. So, Chris, that may help. And it was tagged, they tagged FU.
I have a few in mind as well. I'll pull them up in a sec.
All right.
Well, while he's doing that, some sad news for all you space freaks. Elon Musk's company was set Wednesday afternoon to launch the Dragon capsule, which is a crucial test mission that will send NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley to the International Space Station. We haven't done it from the United States in almost a decade, but the weather didn't cooperate, so they had to scrap it. It was the crew Dragon's planned liftoff. They scrapped it. Less than 20 minutes left in the countdown. The next available launch opportunity is Saturday at 3:22 p.m. Eastern. And people go, well, why wouldn't you just pick a time when the weather's better? Because they have to make sure that the space station is in the exact desired place for the launch. So that's why they can't just wait till a sunnier day. The calculations were, if we do this and we do this now, we'll shoot them straight to the space station. So they can try it again on Saturday, and hopefully they'll be able to do it.
It's incredible how much we still rely on weather in the space age. So we're shooting a rocket to made up with the space station. I mean, the most technically, stuff if you talked about this shit in the 50s, people's heads would have exploded. But we still need the weather. And
we're shooting past the weather.
The thing that brought down I think the Challenger was the O-ring and the weather. The temperature, it was too cold to launch, and in Florida of all places. But it was cold the night before, and we should have scrapped the launch. And I don't know if it was the Challenger or the Endeavor, the one that had the O-ring, the one that had the O-ring problem. So the O-rings, which Challenger, the O-rings need to be flexible. And once it gets under 38 degrees or something like that, they get hard and they're not flexible. And that's what caused the catastrophic failure. But it was the weather. It was them saying, of course, someone said, it's too cold, isn't it? And then someone said, this is on. Mm-hmm. And they launched anyway. And the O-ring, I think, which was also a flaw in the design, which it couldn't handle the weather. But they knew it was too cold to launch. And that's what brought it down. And Max Apatow can make sure my bits and pieces are right. But
you're right. Because they were made at Martin Marietta in New Orleans, Louisiana. Those O-rings.
Well, there you go.
Wow.
Yeah, that is a big problem.
So it's weird that here we are in the space age, but weather's still a big deal. Like we're farmers from 500 years ago. So
And it wasn't,
story.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say it wasn't a lightning storm monsoon. It was a couple of raindrops that spelled, a possible problem.
It was
which,
just
so not just weather, but just a couple of drops.
And this wasn't even that. It was just like, well, it's a little colder than it normally is this time of year. Should have waited. Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
I'll add to that story because I remember Freakonomics did an episode on the Challenger disaster and how the series of mistakes, blah blah blah, led to the disaster. The guy whose job it was to sign off on everything being okay knew that the stuff was too cold, and he didn't sign off. And it was obviously the best decision of his life. His life would have been completely ruined if he had signed off on that.
Right. All right. Anything, Max?
That makes sense because once you get out into space, isn't it butt fucking cold anyway? I mean,
that's the technical term. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how it works. I think it's from going to cold to fire. And it's just during the launch, they need that flexibility. And they probably jettison the launch, whatever, and they don't need the O-rings once they get into space. I think that's what's it. Max, Pat, are we right about this?
I'm still looking. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Next story.
Well, casinos are set to reopen in Nevada on June 4th, but they're going to look very different than what you're used to. According to CNN, detailed housekeeping checklists, half-empty casinos, of course, reservation-only dining. These will be some of the things that'll be different. Of course, no shows, no nightclubs, no sporting events. Like much of the country, the city effectively was shut down to visitors in mid-March. It's been more than 70 days, I think, closed resorts, and they're carefully reopening with face masks and sanitizing stations and social distancing. But again, it's going to have that ghost town feel once it gets back up and running.
Speaking of sports wagering, somebody's got to bring back bum fights because we now have more bums.
I think I get arrested.
Yeah, but think how many more bums we have now, and there's nothing else to gamble on. Everything else is closed down. This would be the salad days for bum fights. Something they could put it up on the big screen at Caesars. We could all socially distance while betting on bums. That guy had started bum fights when we barely had bums.
He was ahead of his time.
He was way ahead of his time. Yeah, and that guy I think did go to prison at some point. All right. Well, maybe we'll find the Whitey rioting in Minneapolis, or I'll take the Challenger story, whichever one you like.
We were looking for the Minneapolis riots first, so that's so Kaylin will put that up. There's been a lot more videos posted as well, but this is some of it.
In the day.
Yeah, I'm just saying the last ones I was watching was Ferguson, and the demographic looked quite a bit different. So I don't know, maybe this is unifying.
Yeah, well, I also saw a video of like these two guys with guns outside of like a tobacco shop, and they said, "We're guarding the tobacco shop. We support the protest. We don't support the looting. So we just want to let everybody know we support the protest."
Those guys were definitely white.
Yeah, they were white, very, very white. Yes.
All right. Well, we don't even need to see it. We get it. That's fine. All right. What else you got, Gina Grad?
Well, fans of the Miami Dolphins are going to get a chance to drive their cars right onto the field at Hard Rock Stadium and relive some of the best moments of the team's history. I mean, they're not using the stadium, so this is sort of a creative solution. The Dolphins announced they're turning the stadium into a giant drive-in movie theater, but not just for movies. The team said they can accommodate 230 cars on the field and plan to host screenings of movies, concerts, and replay some of the biggest games in franchise history.
Ooh, Ace Ventura. That's right. Back when the dolphin was at the game, they would have the dolphin in the tank at the tank. Right.
That's right. They'll be able to order food and drinks online. They'll be delivered to the car. This sounds like a fun situation.
They're getting creative.
You know, it struck me like when I was growing up, you could do whatever you wanted to a dolphin or a killer whale or a kid. We had really no rules.
Oh, wow.
If you wanted to fuck around, you said, "Look, take that dolphin, put it in that tank that's 4 foot deep, and put it in the end zone over there." And let Bob Greasy give it a high. Put a helmet on it. Put a helmet on the dolphin and let Bob Greasy give it a high flipper as he goes by. We could do that. You could do anything you wanted to a kid. You could smoke in front of them. You could smack other people's kids.
No seatbelts.
And you didn't dare touch alligators or crocodiles, and now it's completely flipped.
Yes, you're right. It's game on with alligators and game off with porpoises. I don't know. Call me old-fashioned, but I, as a dad, I've been looking forward to yelling at other people's kids. Like I got yelled at by other people's parents when I was a kid. Oh, you have the O-ring story, Max Panic?
Yeah, so yeah, you're right. So the Challenger, to make each solid rocket booster, they put these O-rings in between each fuel segment, because each fuel segment, whole segment, was filled with powdered aluminum and an oxidizer. And at the launch site, they were assembled vertically, but the O-rings were never tested in extreme cold. So on the morning of the launch, the cold rubber became stiff. It failed to fully seal the joint, and when the shuttle ascended, one of the seals on a booster rocket opened just enough to allow a plume of exhaust to leak out, and the hot gases bathed the hull of the cold external tank full of liquid oxygen and hydrogen until the tank ruptured and exploded.
And that's what you can see in the film. And was it in the high 30s or low 40s? But either way, it's literally just a couple degrees. If it had been a mild morning versus a cold snap, it was probably colder than usual because they wouldn't have scheduled it if it was that temperature. It was probably usually 50 degrees, and this time it was 38 degrees, and they went ahead with it. But it's always nothing. It's a few degrees this way or that way.
The coldest temperature of a previous launch was 20 degrees warmer than what it was.
20. It was just too cold. Nature, weather, that giant man-made piece, that monstrosity, that piece of technology, that thing that was basically the most technologically advanced thing on the planet that human beings had created from the beginning of our existence to then, was the space shuttle, was that thing. And it was taken down because it was a couple degrees colder than usual. That's Mother Nature, man. She's a bitch.
You're telling me. I mean, look, everything about Mother Nature is a bitch. Look what's going on in the world right now. It's no different. We go through all of this stuff. We have modern society. We get one little bug, and it decimates everyone's economy. It's really no different. Mother Nature just comes in and wrecks everything.
All right, that's why we got to kill her. Gina Grad, let's wrap it up. Bring us out of here.
You got it. Sure. I'm Gina Grad, and that's the news.
Gina Grad.
That was the news with Gina Grad.
Fat, a documentary. I highly recommend it. Watch it with your family. You're going to learn so much about what to do and also what not to do. It's streaming on Amazon Prime Video right now. It's also available on Blu-ray, DVD, and on demand as well. And PureVitaminClub.com. Now more than ever, boy, I take it every morning. PureCoffeeClub.com as well. That's another morning ritual. Vinny, thanks for joining and hanging as per usual.
Thank you for having me. And I just want to tell you, it's 1 year since we had that incredible birthday steak eating thing last year with you and just the guys. I still talk about that. I wish more guys can get together like that and do what we did.
Well,
so happy to you, and hopefully we can do that again really soon.
I agree. Judd Apatow is coming up next for a little one-on-one, and we'll take a break. We'll be right back with Judd right after this.
The Adam Carolla Show salutes the winners of the COVID-19 pandemic. Office bad hygiene guy. Yeah, you're the dude your coworkers can smell 2 cubicles away. No one has ever had the heart to tell you your deodorant ain't working, if you even use any. And no one's ever wanted to get close enough to see if that smell on your breath was your lunch or if you have a dead tooth. But now you work from home and blissfully bask in your own stink unaware. And when you go out, the mask mandate means you are the only victim of your medical-grade halitosis. So congratulations, office bad hygiene guy. You are the winner. of COVID-19.
Judd Apatow is joining us, of course, writer, director, stand-up comedian. Don't sleep on the stand-up comedy just because you're a great writer and a great director. Let's not sleep on Judd Apatow's stand-up comedy. The King of Staten Island is the name of the movie. It's available on demand June 12th. I watched it last night, and I have many complimentary thoughts.
Oh, thank you very much.
It was as you progress or as you mature as a filmmaker, I feel like you're just getting into more nuanced kind of human stories and less broader, based humor. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I mean, I think my intentions early were to try to make a movie that was as funny as like the hard comedy movies that I love, that also were credible emotionally and good stories. But I certainly was thinking I'd like to tear the house down every 10 minutes. And there was a lot of movies at that time that were kind of amazing, like Something About Mary. Right. And I always thought, can you combine that kind of high comedy with real emotions? And I think, this movie, I thought, well, this is a drama, and I hope it's funny enough for people, but I'm going to value the story most, and it'll be as funny as it's going to be. It'll reveal itself to me how funny it should be, because there's a lot of colorful people in it. And what was great was when we tested it, nobody said, oh, this isn't as funny as the other ones. And so that made me happy, because I think it's a really good story, and it's very emotional, but it still has big laughs. But I didn't value the laughs as much as I usually do. I'm usually pretty obsessed with like the laugh count and how hard it's crushing.
Well, it's a very funny movie, but it's organically funny. I'm not going to give away too much, but like there's a scene with Bill Burr and his kid and a tattoo, and it's all very plausible and organic, and it's also super funny. And I guess that's what you want. I mean, it's a situation, and Bill Burr's great in this, by the way.
He's amazing.
He's
such a good actor.
I was really, I shouldn't say surprised, although it just flew out of my mouth, but he really shows his acting chops in this movie. And there's a scene that is really funny where he meets Marissa Tomei that is completely organic and hysterical and filled with a lot of sort of humanness.
Well, I don't think, his acting career has been his highest priority. He's done a lot of great acting and things, but I think this is the most he's had to do, the most challenging part for him. But from working with him, you would think he had been doing it for the last 30 years as the only thing he does. He just was ridiculously strong and super funny, and also, really cared about the character. He wasn't just trying to score. He really created this person, this like blowhard firefighter who starts dating Pete Davidson's mother.
Right.
And it was just really fun to watch. And I guarantee you, every great moment in that movie was something Bill thought of on the set. I mean, he was a great collaborator for creating that character and being loose and improvising. Most of the special moments there, we worked on together in rehearsals and improvisations. He just brought a ton to it.
Yeah, I was blown away by how great an actor is. But, unfortunately, we started the show off by, me saying that writer, director, and producer Judd Apatow, but stand-up Judd Apatow. But the way we work is, well, Judd Apatow's a writer and he's a director, and then I guess we'll let him do a little bit of stand-up, and then Bill Burr's a stand-up, and I guess we'll carve out a little room in our brain for him to be an actor as well. But both things can be true. You can be a great stand-up and be a great actor, and you can be a great director and a great stand-up. We're just not wired to accept that,
Yeah, and I think, as we've seen more and more people do it, we realize that it's all part of the same thing. It's storytelling, it's figuring out how to be funny and emotional, and it's all part of your creativity. I mean, Bill is one of the great comedians of all time. When I work with Bill and get to see him up close, when you see him from 8 feet away from the wings, you realize, oh, there's nobody like this guy. And I'm always amazed at just his energy. Every show feels like it's the last show of his career, and he's giving it everything he's got. Just the passion on stage is pretty remarkable. But if anyone wants to see my stand-up, I have a Netflix special. That's the only plug for that I'll do. But it's there, and it's weird that everyone can't do stand-up now. I keep talking to friends and going, "Are you having a nervous breakdown?" And weirdly, nobody is. It doesn't feel like anybody is having that hard a time with giving it a break, because we have friends that haven't taken more than 2 days off in 25 years. So that's a tough change of life.
It is, and I think in a way, maybe it's like a death. Like maybe if you said to somebody who was deeply in love with his wife, and if you said, "Hey, if something happens to Luann, could you go on?" And they'd go, "No, I couldn't go on. I'd get into a fetal position. I'd never come out." And she dies of breast cancer, and then you see him 6 months later, and he introduces you to his new lady friend. And like maybe every stand-up comedian I've known go, if I went 3 days without doing stand-up, I would lose the ability to speak in front of people. Like I couldn't form thoughts or sentences. But there's something that's been a little strange about this self-imposed or governmental imposed Sabbath that we've all been experiencing, where you're almost forced to step off the treadmill and observe the Sabbath. Like I do think about the Sabbath. I'm not a religious person, but I realize how healthy it is when people observe a Sabbath. It's like, sorry, 1 day a week, I sit and we talk and we don't have the TV on and we have dinner and we have friends over and we share ideas. We don't share pictures from our cell phones. And I go, that's so healthy. I'll never do it, but that's so healthy. And this is, I think in some ways, for some people, kind of having a forced Sabbath on like a lot of the stand-ups, kind of going, I'm getting off the hamster wheel and I'm going to do something I thought was going to kill me. And as it turns out, I'm finding some nuance in it.
It's so funny because I keep thinking of it as a deathbed moment.
Right.
It's like we're all getting this moment where we might survive, we might not, and we're really thinking, do we like how we spend our lives? Do we like how we're treating people? Do we like where we are, what we're working on? How are things going? In a weird way, that's what Funny People was about. It was about Adam Sandler's character getting sick and then getting this wisdom when he's sick. And then as soon as he gets better, he tosses all the wisdom out the window and tries to get his old life back immediately, and everything caves in. But it is weird for the whole world at the same time to be in the middle of this assessment.
Right.
And as a culture, it'll be interesting to see when everything gets back to normal, who doesn't act exactly the same way they did before this happened. Does anyone make any real changes, dramatic changes off of this?
Well, I was talking about it in these terms a few weeks ago. I was thinking about the near-death experience and how that's supposed to change your life, and I'm trying to think of if you, and someone should do this, just find out everybody who was on the flight Captain Sully landed in the Hudson River and go, have you changed at all? Because there was a 7-minute period when you were probably going to die. Like you knew, look, if you find out you have pancreatic cancer, that's horrible information, but it plays out over the next series of months. We're going to have to figure out a treatment or what do we do? That moment, like the moment I don't know, Chris, you can look it up, but from the time there was that bird strike to the time he set it down in the Hudson, That was probably 4 minutes, 5 minutes. It was definitely enough time for you to be on that plane and have a near-death experience. None of those people got a scratch on them. Did they go back and mistreat their stepson that following day?
I think this is your next documentary. This is a great documentary idea.
It really is. I mean, all their names are on a manifest somewhere. You can find out all of them. We could go interview all of them and find out if it, because sadly, just like winning the lottery, I don't think it changes things.
I'll say this. Maybe not, but I'm glad that we have found our first collaboration. I feel like this is the moment, and we're gonna do it, and we're gonna find at least 50 of those people and ask them if they made any adjustment. Well, when we did Funny People, part of the inspiration was I read a couple of articles from big people in the movie business and TV, and they were talking about how they, there was this one guy who ran a TV network, and he was saying, he thought he was going to die, and he said, when I was sick, I realized we can be number one again. And I just thought it was such a crazy thought. Like, that's what he thought when he thought he was going to die was, you know what? I think we can be number one in the ratings again. And I think there are those people that nothing touches them. It doesn't get to them. They don't, adjust in any way.
3 hours. 3.
I'm giving you times here. So 3:15 was takeoff. 3:27 p.m. They noticed the bird slurry, they called it. And then 3:35 p.m., Miracle on the Hudson.
Right, so 8 minutes or so. That's enough time to contemplate. That's an eternity when you're thinking you're going to die. So watching the movie, The King of Staten Island, first off, Pete Davidson really came across really nicely, like very vulnerable, very, very likable, like you're really rooting for him. I was thinking about you, and I was thinking about me, because I was thinking about those guys, Pete and his sort of crew, early 20s, no direction, kind of hanging around, ripping bong loads, watching The Purge, and no direction, just rudderless. And I remember being that age and a little bit younger. I think Pete was playing a 24-year-old in the movie. Being after high school and before I got somewhat established as a carpenter, it was like 18 to 25. And this sense, the scariest feeling wasn't fear. It was no direction. Just nothing. I had no idea what I was doing, and neither did anyone around me. And I dreaded that feeling. I would have wanted to just join the Marines or be incarcerated or like have something. I had nothing to do, and I felt like sort of helpless. You always knew comedy, always wanted to do comedy, always were like laser focused on it. What were you doing when you were Pete's age in the movie?
Yeah, I was fully working hard at that moment. I mean, my background was just, I was very nervous about supporting myself. I didn't really feel like anybody could support me. And I think out of just fear and my own hyper vigilance from the youngest age, like 10, I'm like, I got to get a job. I mean, I was literally thinking that as a really little kid, like you got to know what you're doing and you have to stay focused. And I was very neurotic about it. My grandfather was a jazz producer, so I knew that he had created this career from nothing as a kid in the 40s and just chased around Charlie Parker and people like that and begged them to let him record them. So I knew there was a way to succeed in show business if you were a hustler in some way, but it was very fear driven. So by the time I was 24, I mean, I was producing the Ben Stiller show on Fox. I met Ben Stiller. I was doing stand-up and producing some stand-up specials for people. And I produced a couple of Tom Arnold specials, 3 Tom Arnold specials and Roseanne's special. And and I didn't have that much experience. And I met Stiller, and we pitched a sketch show to HBO, and they bought it, and then they sold it to Fox. So we were kids, and we thought we were going to do some fringe cable sketch show. And then suddenly we were on Fox up against 60 Minutes. And I had no experience, and I was just winging it, trying to figure out how to do it. And I would sit in my office, really embarrassed that everyone on the crew was older than me. I felt terrible that I was in charge of anything. And I would read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I didn't know how to manage like 100 people. I really was very overwhelmed by the responsibility of running a writing staff and just getting the show delivered. And I would sit in my room and listen to self-help tapes. And one just said over and over again, I am at peace with the world and everybody in it. I am at peace with the world and everybody in it. Because I was so stressed. And when it got canceled, there was a part of me that was like, thank God I have no gas in the tank. We've made 13 episodes, and I feel like we've been doing this for 25 years. It was really a lot of work.
You mentioned hypervigilance, which Dr. Drew diagnosed me with many, many years ago. And I'm glad you brought it up because I had this experience last night. Last night, I went outside because I was fiddling around with the outdoor lighting or whatever it is. It was like 10 o'clock at night. I went out the back sliding door, and I was standing in the dark in my backyard. I watched my son get up, and I saw him walking past the long bank of sliding glass doors. And my first thought was, oh, I don't want to scare him, like, because I'll look like a shadowy figure out in the backyard, and he'll have no context. They'll think of prowlers in the backyard. So I sort of made sure to not do anything or catch his attention or whatever. But I noticed that he was just looking at his phone, and he just walked right on past. He never glanced. He never looked at the bank of windows or into the dark yard or any of that. Then he walked around into the kitchen. I was like, okay, I don't want to be standing here because he's going to see me in the window. The point is, he never looked up. He never looked up, and he got his food, and he went back in his room. And then I thought to myself, oh, that kid feels safe. Because when I was a kid, I would have done a shoulder roll into the living room and then popped my head up and then looked right and left and then crawled on my elbows into the kitchen looking for prowlers, looking for people outside, feeling vulnerable, like I couldn't be protected. So somehow the feeling of vulnerability turns into hypervigilance. Like when you see the way animals that live in trees act when they're on the ground. You know what I mean? Like always looking like, okay, now I'm vulnerable. Yeah. I'm not 18 feet in the air. I could get run over or eaten by a coyote. Like my head's on a swivel. So does the hypervigilance exist sort of organically, or is it created because you feel vulnerable?
Well, I think that, what I've learned in therapy over the last few years is that we're all in a state of some sort of fight or flight at all times, right? And so in evolution, as it has been explained to me, you would be very aware of who's going to try to eat me. Right. And so our brains are literally designed to avoid getting eaten. So we're built to get scared and run real fast or freeze, and that none of that really applies to the modern world. So we're constantly overreacting. Our nervous system is literally built to run away from a bear.
Right.
And so I think, and then if you had any trauma as a kid, all of that is jacked up.
Right. So I grew up with parents that I didn't think would protect me if somebody broke into the house. So I had that kind of sleep with one eye open because you're on your own. My son, just based on the way he walked from his room to the kitchen last night, doesn't possess that same fear. And rightfully so. It would be irrational if he did. But how did you grow up? Did you have that sense where your parents would take care of you?
Well, my parents, were very loving, but they got into a terrible divorce when I was finishing up middle school. like a really bad divorce that never got resolved. It never calmed down. 10 years later, it was still unresolved.
Right.
And I think that put me in a state of hyper vigilance, and it made me very nervous. It made, when your parents fight a lot, whenever they're fighting, someone's wrong, right? So if either of your parents is clearly way off and really wrong and overreacting and emotional and flipping out, as a little kid, you go, oh, I can't trust their advice.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what it did to me. As great as they also were, part of me went like, I think you got to figure out some of this shit yourself, because if these people can't even work their divorce out, you can't listen to a lot of their advice. They're going to be hit and miss at best. And it made me a more nervous person. And then the hard part is that is the reason for all my success. All my success is driven by this like terror of not succeeding. And as a parent, we're trying to make our kids really comfortable and happy and solid, but hope they still have ambition. And that they, like for me, like, yeah, I work hard because I'm afraid it's all going to cave in. But
Right.
Can you work really hard without that kind of madness that drives you? And as you get older, you're trying to get rid of it. And then I feel like I'm less nuts with all that. And I still work hard, but I'm not as crazed as I was at 30, which is probably good because I was doing too much and being too hard on myself. And I don't think it makes the work better. And you slowly realize, oh, the work isn't better because I'm hyper vigilant and crazy all day. It's a lot of wasted energy.
To some degree. So what I mean is you're hyper vigilant, and the difference between a product where you're in the edit bay and one where you're not in the edit bay, and or how much time you spend in the edit bay, right? Because that hypervigilance pays dividends in the edit bay, right? There's just things you notice that other people can't, and will never notice. So it's like there is a positive thing to do with that. The problem is you have to be able to shut it off and leave the edit bay at some point and go home, right?
And not be that lunatic when you get home. And that was something that took me a long time to get better at, which is you're in almost a state when you're at work. You're almost shaking from working hard and focusing and trying not to screw anything up and looking for problems that haven't happened yet to solve them before they even happen. And then you come home and you're supposed to be super mellow and mirroring your children and a normal person and just loving and free. And that's a rough transition. I mean, I remember I used to go home and I would just have to take a shower when I got home just for my brain to switch into a more normal gear.
Well, we were talking about hypervigilance, and it struck me when you said that your parents, that you kind of knew early on that these people weren't going to make good decisions for you. You felt like it was up to you. I had that feeling in spades. I always tell people all the time, like I learned early on these two weren't going to make good decisions for me. Yeah. And thus there's a vulnerability that you feel that our kids don't feel because we have led them to believe we're much more competent than maybe we even are.
I have not. I mean, I really feel like you need to screw up your kids just enough so they want to get the hell out of the house, and I do think I've accomplished that. My daughter Maud is in the movie King of Staten Island. She plays Pete's sister, and she's on that show Euphoria and that TV show Hollywood, and she's working her ass off. And I'm like, I may have screwed her up perfect.
Just the perfect amount.
A perfect amount. She's responsible, but creative and neurotic enough to be interesting, and she does a great job.
No, a kid is like a poached egg, which is you don't want it raw and all running all over the place, and you don't want it hard boiled. There's that sweet spot where there's just a little of that yellow in the middle, and if you screw them up just enough, you'll get the perfect poached egg. Sorry, you were saying.
I can't say that I did a better job than my parents, and I can't say that my parents did a bad job. I mean, I'm everything's going well, but that's how I felt as a little kid. I'm sure that they did most everything very well. But as a little kid, the idea that there were these two people and they made me, I'm half him, I'm half her, and they hate each other, creates something psychological in me. Like, I don't know, if I'm with my mom and she's mad at my dad, I think I'm kind of like him, and I think you just get a lot of confused feelings about who you are when there's just so much strife. And also back then, no one talked about their feelings. I mean, they never really sat me down and said, hey, let's go to a therapist or let's kind of work through what's going on. There was a lot of just denial. There was no conversations about how's this affecting you? How are you doing? Well, I've told this story before, but my dad left out a book on a coffee table that was called Growing Up Divorced, with the hope that on my own I would read it. And here's the weird thing. I did read it and it was helpful. I didn't know he left it there for me to read. I thought it was just his book. But years later, I said to my dad, how did you know I read it? Like, you didn't even know I read it. And he just was like, I hoped you'd read it. And I'm like, but you never asked me if I read it. Like, you didn't know I read it. He just left a book out and hoped that would solve the problem.
The type of parenting that was done then versus now is people can't believe how far we've traveled in such a short period of time. But I do, I think a lot of it, like, people thought nothing about smoking in front of kids back in the day. Get in a car, roll the windows up, light a Winston, smoking in restaurants, eating out with your kids, whatever it is. I think adults did kind of the same thing with arguing and other things that were far more dangerous than secondhand smoke.
Oh, just screaming in front of us. They wouldn't hesitate to just scream at each other with kids around.
Right. And, we've both been married for a while and we've had our dust ups, but always super careful to do it in a way that's not within earshot of the kids. And like, I could remember my mom locking herself in her bedroom and just yelling freak out as loud as she could. And I was like standing outside her bedroom going, oh my God, now I'm freaked out as well, because you're basically the captain of the ship and you're screaming into the intercom. You have no idea what's going on. And that,
I knew my parents were getting divorced because I heard them through the wall.
Really?
And then they told me like a couple of weeks later, but like I had heard the whole discussion through the wall.
You were what age at that time?
Well, that literally happened in 7th grade. Then they got back together and then they broke up again after 9th grade. And, the 70s was that was a completely different time. I remember my dad reading this self-help book, Your Erogenous Zones. And we always said that was the book that made him want to get divorced. He finally read something about his feelings. He finally read something that helped him figure out if he was happy or not happy. And that was all new in the 70s. People were just beginning to consider those things. These were World War II kids and their parents didn't express themselves openly and talk about what they were going through.
I wonder if there's a renaissance for that in today's society, meaning, it was funny. I was talking to Rob Lowe sort of about this subject. We're all generally the same age, and he was explaining that his mom and his dad did sort of the same thing. Like they went on some sort of journey instead of raising their kids. Like my mom did the same thing. She got a biorhythm wheel to figure out if it was an extra critical day or not, and started going like, so what happened was you have a 10-year-old kid, and at some point you have this epiphany and you go, I've never worked on myself. You know what? I'm going to start focusing on me. And it's like, that's great, but you have a 10-year-old. So there's an interesting version of that going on now, a much healthier version, but there's a lot of like 50-year-olds are like, I'm getting into meditation and I'm going full vegan and I'm going to go to retreats and I'm going to go to primal scream therapy and stuff. And it's good, but there's still an element of what about the kid while you're over here?
We try to tell the kids about it now, we try to get our kids to meditate and we try to get our kids to, understand how their mind works and talk to someone if they feel like talking to somebody. And it is a very different conversation. And we've always been open with them in a way my parents have. And I mean, we'll say to our kids, like, we're normal people. We have problems. We don't present ourselves as perfect beings who you better listen to, or we're going to kick the shit out of you. I mean, that's kind of what it felt like to me as a kid. But it's like, you're in charge. And if I get in trouble, it's going to get messed up here. Like, I was scared of my parents, of doing things and getting in trouble. And it's not like they did anything, but that was, a generation that threatened a lot.
Right.
There was a lot of threats. But we're not like that with our kids in the sense that we go like, we're not perfect. And I'm going to tell you how I'm not perfect. And you can call me on my shit and I'll tell you why maybe I mishandled something. And I think that's generally a better way to do it, so that they go, okay, my dad's a real person. And this is, here are his issues. Sometimes this is the thing that upsets him for this reason. And hopefully that's a better way to do it. If anything, I'm annoying them like, hey, you want to meditate? Let's go put on the Calm app for a little while, because you want them to learn the lessons you learned at 50 at 17. And there's no way they will, because you got to go through it. But maybe you can give them a little head start.
So for you, this movie's a real, I don't know what to call it, maturation or something. It's a really strong film, and it's got a ton of heart, although I always hate when people say that, but it does.
I don't mind.
And it's got a lot of laughs, and it's like, I feel like it's what Judd Apatow has been evolving into over the last few years, the King of Staten Island. Is it, so for you, are there things you want to do? Can you do anything you want? I interviewed, it wasn't, who'd I interview? It wasn't Scorsese, it was Coppola. And I interviewed him like 10 years ago, and he said, I'd like to make this movie and that movie, but they'll only let me make this movie and that movie. And it's surprising when you talk to people that are very accomplished or had Hall of Fame type careers, and then they kind of explain how I can't really do this, I could only do that. Is there something you want to do, or is there things you want to do and feel like they won't let you do it, or you're going to have to do it on your own? Or are there things that have nothing to do with show business or Hollywood that you'd like to discuss?
Well, I think that it's all about the budget. Scorsese wants to do these movies that are very, very expensive.
All right, Coppola. Sorry, I screwed that up.
I mean, well, Coppola, I never quite understood. I think he was more experimental. I mean, he really wanted to do things that people had not done and tell stories that were not necessarily the types of stories that mainstream America was seeking out. And then it really is like, well, how much money do you need to do it?
Right.
Do you need $3 million? Do you need $45 million? And, that's a business. You have to figure out how you're going to play the game. And Scorsese clearly found a way to score enough times that he's given these opportunities to do something like The Irishman. Just yesterday, they said they're greenlighting his other movie, which is a $150 million Western with Leonardo DiCaprio and De Niro, I think, that Eric Roth wrote. So it's really how much money you're asking of people. Like for me, I don't need that much. I'm not making cheap movies, but I'm making movies basically for the same budgets I have for the last 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not suddenly going like, but now I need 120 to do it. Like it's kind of the same scope. And the one thing that I am allowed to do is they will let me make a movie with someone who isn't a movie star.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's kind of what I like to do, which is get people excited because they don't know the star, or they know them, but they haven't seen them be the star. For me, it's more exciting to show, Pete Davidson and Bill Burr and Ricky Velez and a lot of people you don't know, because I think the audience loves it. They love to discover somebody.
Right.
And that's the thing that, because it's worked a bunch of times, they'll allow me to do that not everyone is allowed to do.
Is there something you want to do that maybe they don't want you to do?
No, I don't even have that many ideas. I have no stack of thoughts. Usually I finally think of a thought and then I try to figure out how to get someone to let me do it. But I don't have, I literally have almost zero movie ideas sitting around. So it's not like I have a stack of my rejected things. Usually when things don't happen, it's because the actor or the actress turned me down. And I thought of something that's so specific to someone, and then they say, I don't want to do it. And then there kind of isn't anyone else who can do it. And then it dies because of that.
The Zen Diaries of Gary Shandling is a great doc. It's a multi-series doc, right? I think two parts. Yeah. That was great. And whenever we talk off the air, we always sort of talk about docs. Any thoughts about any subjects for docs? Or, I make a lot of docs about cars. I feel like maybe you doing them about comedians sounds like you're pretty qualified for that.
Yeah, I mean, we're excited. We're talking about making a documentary about George Carlin. And that's somebody that hasn't had that kind of treatment before, and he's been so important in so many different eras of comedy. So I'm very excited, especially now that the world is so weird and crumbling in so many ways. When you look back at his last few specials, and when he was really angry and did some dark comedy, people have started passing around these bits. You see them on the internet all the time. And they all sadly apply to a lot of things that we see happening in the world.
Yeah, like when he was talking about the immune system and growing up and jumping into the river and being exposed to all the germs and all that stuff. Yeah, the thing that's really interesting about a real philosopher like George Carlin, like a guy who really studied life, is when you think about some of the things that some of the classic philosophers said, Plato or whomever from thousands of years ago, they all sound perfectly apt for today. And you realize that the thing about, I think it's like great design, something that was architecture from the 70s looks like shit today, but really great Art Deco design looks awesome today. And music, disco-y, early 80s, Flock of Seagulls, synth rock, it sounds horrible and dated, but really good music. The Beatles, George Harrison, Graham Parker, thank you. Timeless sort of stuff. And I feel that way about comedy, right? Like George, so what Carlin is doing is a philosophy, and it's sort of timeless because good philosophy is always true.
Yeah, his stuff doesn't age, and a lot of comedy has aged really badly, and his doesn't. There's an amazing bit that goes around the internet where he says about government that you don't have any rights. You just have the rights that they want you to think you have.
Right.
And it's a really remarkable long routine where he just talks about the entire game being rigged. And, I've never been conspiratorial, but you feel like the world has become more and more transparent, where you see the relationships between countries and government and what is allowed to happen and what are people's motivations for doing things. And it is hard not to think that a lot of what George Carlin said about financial interests controlling the government and how a lot of what we think is reality isn't. It's like meant to sedate you so you won't question anything. That was a big thing he talked about. They want you on your gadgets. They don't want you to get a good education so that you don't pay attention to what's happening.
Well, I have a thought I'm going to tease because I got to run a quick spot here, but I realize with guys like Carlin and others where you go, well, what information do you have? Do you have documents that are unredacted, or what have you gotten your hands on that gives you this information? But in a way, if you have a brain like George Carlin, you have all the information because you're always reading the tea leaves around you. You don't need documents. Sure. You know what I mean? You have a way of thinking that has such clarity to it that you can suss these things out. Other people need evidence. you have your own divining rod, your brain, and you see so much truth where other people don't. We'll talk about that in a second. First, let me hit True Niagen. Heard about the trend of NAD boosters? There's only one, backed by both clinical research and regulatory approvals. True Niagen. From age 40 to 60, humans experience a near 50% decline in NAD, leaving the mitochondria to compete for a shrinking supply of their most valuable energetic resource. Stress on the immune system, lack of exercise, overeating can also deplete NAD because cells have to expand for more energy function. I take True Niagen on a daily basis. Shannon Sharp, who's in phenomenal shape, does as well. I talked to him the other day. So do many folks who they don't talk about it. They just do it. And I talked to the owner of the company, and he's really onto something here. I've been on it, it's about 4 months now. True Niagen. You can visit TRUNIAGEN.com and use the code Adam. Get $20 off your first 3-month supply or 3-month plus supply. Now until May 31st, so get going, but try and notice a difference. All right, we'll take a quick break. We'll come right back with Judd Apatow and finish up right after this.
It's time to check Adam's voicemail.
Adam, Big Pink, calling you from City Island, New York. Do we really need douchebag, dirtbag, and scumbag? What's the difference?
You can leave us a message at 888-634-1744.
Well, I've been lobbying for a long time to get rid of douchebag and replace it with douche nozzle, which is far more offensive and gets the job done. So in my world, we can get rid of dirtbag and douchebag, and we'll just switch it to douche nozzle. And if you'd like me to put it in a sentence, Judd Apatow, I will happily do it. It could work on the construction site when, like, the foreman came around. Hey, you douche nozzles, get back to work. There's that version of it. There's the one where you cut off the cab driver and he calls you a douche nozzle when he pumps his fist at you. It's got a lot of applications.
We got to switch up the curses a little bit. They're getting repetitive at this point.
Well, you know, it was funny. Our production company, Jimmy Kimmel and Daniel Kelson's production company, is called Jackhole Productions. And Jackhole Productions came from when Jimmy and I were on the radio. They'd say, you can say titties, but you can't say tits. And you can say God and damn, but you can't say God damn it. And they had like a whole bunch of dumb rules. And Jimmy set out to think of a new swear word. And he came up with jackhole. And
then they let it through.
They let it through because George Carlin had not given the 7 words you can't say. I mean, literally, the FCC built their rules around George Carlin's 7 dirty words.
I remember we said something sucks on Fox, and they said you can't say sucks. You have to say what you are sucking. It can't be like you suck. I was like, you suck eggs, or it could be balls. You know, you have to know what you're sucking.
They would do this thing where they would go, you can say you're pissed off, and you can say you're taking a piss, but you can't say you pissed on your girlfriend. Like, it was like when I was doing the Man Show with Jimmy, we said, how much ass crack can you show? And they said, you can show some ass crack, like if you're doing a plumber's bit on SNL and Dan Aykroyd's the Norge man or something. But hey, they said, they thought about it and they said, you can show 3/4 ass crack. So
3/4 of the total crack?
Of the total crack. So we invented 3/4 ass crack shorts to put on all the Juggy Dance Squads. It was simpler times. So are you moving forward with the George Carlin doc, or just thinking about it?
No, we're about to start. We haven't started yet, but we have the full Gary Shandling team, and that's a multi-year project, but we're very excited to do that.
And how does it begin for you? Obviously, there's a lot of research.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it for him is absorbing the material, all the specials, and trying to figure out the arc of his thinking. How did his thinking evolve from the 60s till his last special? There's the personal side, there's the creative side. I think we're very interested in the creative side and how it applies to today. What did he talk about that we're now seeing in action today?
And do you, in advance, sort of think, well, this has got to be a 3-parter because the guy's breadth and width of his career was so great, or does someone else decide that?
I mean, it's a 2-parter, and I think I like that format. Like 2 long parts. But I enjoyed 10 parts of Michael Jordan. I was fully there. I as a fan of documentaries, when they're working, they don't have to end. I can watch an hour of a good documentary, once a week for a really long time.
You're right. There's no expiration date. I watched the 10 The Last Dance episodes like eating a bowl of cereal in 2 minutes, and I was done, and I was like, I need a second bowl. Where is it? Like the following, I had a little bit of post-traumatic stress disorder the following week when I turn on the TV on Sunday, and it's like, oh, that's it. All 10 are gone.
Yeah, it was too good. It was like The Sopranos in a way. Like when you knew The Sopranos was ending, you're like, oh man, there's only like 3 more Sopranos. It definitely had that feeling of something special. You wanted to go on and on. I'm hoping at some point someone will put on the internet the edit of it before Michael Jordan gave any notes. Like, here's the cut before he said, lose that section. I don't want to talk about that. I don't get the sense that he did a lot of that, but it would be really interesting to know what was too far.
It's funny, our relationship with guys like Jordan, because there's a part of us that hates the bully in him, and then there's another part that respects the shit out of essentially the same qualities that made him the bully. And I don't know where you come down on that. Like, how do you
feel? That approach? Well, I don't know, because I'm not an athlete, so I could listen to him say, if you can't take shit from me, how are you going to be able to handle it during the big game? But I think that's not really how most teams function. I don't think that's why the Boston Celtics were great, or, why the Lakers were great in that era, because someone was screaming at them like that the entire time. It may have worked for that team. I mean, obviously what they accomplished is ridiculous, but the Golden State Warriors, that's not how that team functions. So it's hard to know if it really motivates people. The question should be given to the people around him to go, if he didn't yell at you, do you think you still would have played well? Did you need that, or were you going to work your ass off anyway?
I think the rule is someone is allowed to yell at you to do things as long as they're doing the exact same thing they're yelling about. I think the problem comes, we see it with the government all the time, where they say, here's what you got to do, and then we find out they're doing something else. Or they're
like the president not wearing a mask.
Right. You can't say do this and then go not do that. That's exactly right. That's where it breaks off. I think Jordan yelled at everyone to do 7/8 of what he was already doing. And I think that's effective, or could be effective. If he just yelled at people to do it and then he did half of what he was yelling about, then it would never work, right?
Well, it was interesting because I just watched the Lance Armstrong documentary.
Yes. I watched that too. It certainly felt like there were some commonalities in terms of people who just burn so hot to win. They're just going to tear the village down to make it happen. There is a madness, and people who can decade after decade
spend that much time on a bike, that much time in a gym, and the focus never weakens. It doesn't soften. And you see it in Lance Armstrong's eyes. You see it in Jordan's eyes, like Jordan laughing at the other players when they hand him the computer.
Right.
And they try to say that they were good, and he just laughs at them.
Yeah.
You know, and there's a lot of that with Lance Armstrong too, where he kept saying over and over, wouldn't change a thing. Wouldn't change a thing. Really?
Yeah.
Nothing?
I know.
Change anything. But that is the competitiveness is still there, and they don't know what to do with it. It's still in their minds.
Well, you know, as I was watching the Lance Armstrong story, I was thinking about he starts off as a triathlete, and all that is pure will. You know, I mean, you can see Jordan had a 42-inch vertical. You don't have that. You're not dunking from the free throw line. But Lance Armstrong, when he was 15, was like competing in triathlons against professionals, and he was competitive and even winning, and you realize that's all will. I mean, yeah, some people are a little stronger than others, and some people have a little more endurance than others, but what you're going to swim 2 miles, you're going to run a marathon, you're going to ride your bike 100 miles. It's 100% will. That's what that guy is. And Jordan is what happens when you take Lance Armstrong's will and put it into a guy who's 6'7" and has a 40-inch vertical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think, you know, Kobe was like that. You know, all those people, they're the first person in every day, last person to leave, but for decades. I mean, that's what's interesting to me. And I see it in comedy. You see it with Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle is working harder than everybody. In addition to just being great, he is out there busting his ass, doing long shows, you know, just writing and there's also the will in the creative community. I mean, look at Scorsese. He's like a Michael Jordan guy. He's you know, deep in his 70s, about to take on another $150 million movie. The amount of energy and focus and passion to still want to do that. Bob Dylan's about to put out a double album, I hear, this summer. He's 79 years old.
Well, last question for you, Judd, because I know you have a heart out, and don't worry, I'll give the movie the plugs and the praise. So I personally sometimes feel like I don't want to squander my opportunities and or talent. Like, so what kind of drives me a lot is just sort of, well, there's so many good subjects for docs, and I want to say I did as many of them as I could, or I have so many jokes to tell, or as sort of a squandered opportunity. You left something on the table. Not money, ability. Do you know what I'm saying? How does that resonate with you?
I try to flip the whole thing as a mental trick for myself, which is I like to think that my career is over and this is the aftermath. And that makes me less stressed. You know, if I feel like I need to be in a certain place or at the top of my game or having a certain output, that makes me really nervous and it doesn't make me creative. So in my head, what I think is my career is over and this is like the sputtering out of a couple of other things. Like, remember when Dylan put out Time Out of Mind and he hadn't had an incredible album in a while, and out of the blue, you're like, oh my God, that might be the best one.
Right.
That's how I like to look at my career now. Like, it's over. And maybe every once in a while I might make something that's like Time Out of Mind. And that makes me not worry, because the worry kicks up my critic and makes me not work as hard. So I like to think that I retired 20 years ago, but then every once in a while I put out an album on an indie label.
Well, his Time Out of Mind for this generation is The King of Staten Island. I watched it in its entirety last night, and it is a great film. It's available on demand coming up on June 12th. Please watch it and watch some great performances and some great direction and great writing as well. Judd, we'll talk to you very soon. Thanks for stepping in.
Yes, thank you very much. Take care. Be well, everybody.
All right, let me hit Geico right here. You were sharing your stuff online, your dance moves, your DIY haircut fails, your inner lip sync star. How about Geico does a little sharing? So good news, 15% credit on your car and motorcycle policies for current and new customers. Geico's committed for the long haul. And look, they know you're not doing as much driving as you did a few months ago, and they're sharing some of it, kicking some of it back, 15% credit. Last, your full policy term. Go to geico.com/giveback and find out how you can get in on this. Live, by the way, Adam Carolla is Unprepared. We're doing it from quarantine Monday, 7 o'clock Pacific, and you can register now at SiriusXM.com/Adam Carolla and watch me perform live from my house like we did it a few weeks ago. Nashville Zanies coming up June 12th and 13th. We're doing some live podcasts and some stand-up over there, so get those tickets before they sell out. I'm Your Emotional Support Animal, which is a new book out on the 16th. Pre-order it. It just helps. And until next time, it's Adam Carolla for Vinny Tortorich, Judd Apatow, and Bald Brian and Gina Grad saying mahalo.